I worked 3 jobs to save my son's life. He never knew why I was always gone, and by the time he found out, he had already decided I did not love him anymore. Before I tell you how I got here, tell me where you are watching from, and what time it is where you are right now. Whether it is early morning, the middle of a busy day, or late at night when the world has finally gone quiet. I would love to know. I read every comment, and I am always grateful for the time you spend here with me. My name is Margot, and for 18 years, being Ethan's mother was the only identity I ever needed. I did not need to be successful or admired or even particularly happy. I just needed to be his. The woman who made him breakfast. The woman who knew exactly how he liked his sandwiches cut. The woman who could tell from the sound of his footsteps whether he had a good day at school or a terrible one. We had rituals, small, ordinary things that probably would not mean much to anyone else. Every Sunday morning, we made pancakes together. He would crack the eggs and I would mix the batter, and we would argue about whether chocolate chips belonged in pancakes or whether that was basically just eating dessert for breakfast. He always won that argument. I always pretended to be scandalized, and then I always added the chocolate chips. I can still see those mornings so clearly. The kitchen would be filled with early sunlight, the kind that makes everything look softer than it really is. Ethan would shuffle in wearing his old basketball shorts and a t-shirt that was getting too small for him, his hair sticking up in every direction. He never combed it on Sundays. That was part of the ritual too. "Morning, Mom," he would say, opening the refrigerator and staring into it like he was searching for the meaning of life. "Good morning, sweetheart. Pancakes today?" Is that even a question? He would pull out the eggs and the milk and set them on the counter with exaggerated care, like he was handling precious artifacts. "But we are doing chocolate chips, right?" Ethan, chocolate chips in pancakes is basically dessert for breakfast. "Mom, we have had this conversation approximately 500 times. Chocolate chips are a breakfast food. They provide energy, they provide joy, they provide everything a growing teenager needs, and they provide cavities. I would say they provide happiness." He would reply, and he would grin at me, that crooked smile that made my heart ache with how much I loved him. "And happiness is more important than dental health." I am not sure your dentist would agree with that philosophy. I would retort, "My dentist does not have to eat boring plain pancakes. I do. Well, I would if you did not love me enough to add chocolate chips." And there it was. The trap he set every single Sunday. The implication that my love could be measured in chocolate chips. "You are manipulating me," I would say. "I am persuading you. There is a difference. Fine, chocolate chips. But only because I love you." I know. He would crack the eggs into the bowl, always making a little ceremony of it. That is why it works. Every night before bed, even when he got older and his friends would have mocked him for it, he would come into the living room and sit next to me on the couch. He would tell me about his day. Not the surface things, the real things. The girl he liked who did not know he existed. The math test he was worried about. The way his friend Marcus said something that hurt his feelings. But he did not know how to bring it up. Those conversations were sacred to me. I would turn off the television, put down whatever I was reading, and give him my complete attention. Sometimes he would talk for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. It did not matter. I was there. I was present. I was his. "Mom, can I ask you something?" he said one night. About 3 months before everything changed, always. "Do you think people can tell when you like them? Like, do you think it is obvious?" I smiled. This was about the girl. It was always about the girl lately. Her name was Sophie, and she sat 2 rows ahead of him in English class, and apparently she had smiled at him once in the hallway, and he had been analyzing that smile for 2 weeks. "I think some people are better at reading those signals than others," I said carefully. "Why? Are you worried Sophie does not know you exist?" His ears turned red. "How did you know I was talking about Sophie?" "Because you have mentioned her approximately 40 times in the last 2 weeks. I have not, Ethan. You told me about her shoes. You do not tell me about people's shoes unless you are very interested in the person wearing them." He groaned and covered his face with his hands. I am pathetic. You are not pathetic. You are 14. This is what 14 looks like. Did you know Dad liked you when you first met him? The question caught me off guard. We did not talk about his father much. David had left when Ethan was 7, and the wound had mostly healed over. But sometimes it still ached. I did, I said quietly. Your father was not subtle about his feelings. He was very confident, very sure of himself. Is that why you liked him? Partly, but also because he made me laugh. And because he paid attention to me, really paid attention. He remembered things I said. He noticed when I was sad. He cared. At least he had cared in the beginning. Before life got hard, before responsibility became too heavy, before he decided that being a husband and father was not the adventure he had signed up for. But I did not say that part. Ethan did not need to carry his father's failures. So I should pay attention to Sophie. Remember things she says? I think you should be yourself. And if Sophie is the right person, she will notice you. And if she does not, then she is not the right person. He nodded slowly, processing this. Then he leaned his head on my shoulder, something he had not done in months. Thanks, Mom. For what? For always being here, for always listening, for not making me feel stupid about this stuff. I kissed the top of his head. I will always be here, sweetheart. Always. I meant it when I said it. I believed it with everything in me. I had no idea how soon I would break that promise. I knew my son. I knew the way his voice changed when he was hiding something. I knew the way he chewed his bottom lip when he was anxious. I knew that he hated green beans but loved broccoli, which made no sense to me, but I never questioned it. I knew that he was afraid of thunderstorms but would never admit it. So on stormy nights, I would make hot chocolate and suggest we watch a movie together, giving him an excuse to not be alone. I knew him, and he knew me. We were a team. It was just the two of us. And that was enough. Until the day it was not enough anymore. Until the day the doctor said words that turned my entire world into something I did not recognize. It started with bruises. Small ones at first, on his arms, his legs. Ethan played basketball, so bruises were normal, but these were different. They appeared without explanation. They did not fade the way bruises should. Then came the fatigue. He would come home from school and go straight to his room. He stopped wanting to go out with his friends. He stopped staying up late. He was always tired. Maybe you are getting sick, I said one afternoon when I found him asleep on the couch at 4 p.m. Do you want me to make you some soup? I am fine, Mom, just tired. You are always tired lately. I am a teenager. We are supposed to be tired. But this was different. I could feel it, mothers know. We know when something is wrong with our children, the way we know when a storm is coming. It is instinct. It is cellular. I made an appointment with our family doctor. Dr. Morrison had been seeing Ethan since he was a baby. He was kind and thorough and never made me feel like I was overreacting. He examined Ethan carefully, asked questions, pressed on his abdomen, looked at the bruises. I want to run some blood work, he said. Just to be safe. Blood work for what? Ethan asked. Just routine tests, nothing to worry about. But I could see it in Dr. Morrison's eyes. He was worried. He was trying not to show it, but I could see it. The blood work came back 3 days later. Dr. Morrison called me at work. Mrs. Chen, I need you to bring Ethan to County General Hospital. Today, this afternoon. My stomach dropped. What is wrong? His white blood cell count is extremely elevated. I have already called ahead to the pediatric oncology department. They are expecting you. Oncology, cancer. The word hit me like a fist to the chest. Are you sure? I asked, even though I knew it was a stupid question. Doctors do not send you to oncology unless they are sure. I am not sure of anything yet, Dr. Morrison said gently, but we need to find out what is going on. Can you get him there this afternoon? Yes, of course. I picked Ethan up from school early. He was confused, annoyed at being pulled out of class. He did not understand why we were going to the hospital. I did not know how to explain it without terrifying him. Dr. Morrison wants you to see a specialist, I said as we drove. Just to check on those bruises? Mom, I am fine. This is ridiculous. Humor me. We sat in the waiting room at County General for 45 minutes. The pediatric oncology wing was decorated with bright colors and cheerful murals, but it could not hide what it was. A place where children came to fight for their lives. I watched the other families. A mother holding a bald little girl who could not have been more than 5. A father reading to his son who was connected to an IV pole. A teenager with a scarf wrapped around her head, scrolling through her phone with the practiced boredom of someone who had been here too many times. This could not be happening. Not to us, not to Ethan Chen. A nurse called his name. We followed her back to an examination room. She took his vitals, asked him questions, smiled in that professional way that gave nothing away. Dr. Patel will be with you shortly. We waited. Ethan sat on the examination table, swinging his legs, looking at his phone. I sat in the chair by the window, watching him, memorizing him, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the way he chewed on his thumbnail when he was nervous, the way he kept glancing at me like he was trying to figure out how worried he should be. Mom, seriously, what is going on? I do not know yet, sweetheart. We are going to find out. The door opened, and Dr. Patel walked in. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her late 30s, with kind eyes and an air of calm competence. Hello, Ethan, Mrs. Chen. I am Dr. Patel. She shook both our hands and sat down on the rolling stool. I have been looking at your blood work, Ethan, and I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay? I guess. Have you been feeling more tired than usual? Yeah, but I thought that was just from school and basketball. Have you had any fevers? Night sweats? Maybe. I do not know. I get hot at night sometimes. Any pain in your bones or joints? My legs hurt sometimes, but I thought that was from growing. My mom says I am having a growth spurt, Dr. Patel nodded, making notes. Have you noticed any swelling in your neck or under your arms? Ethan touched his neck. I do not think so. She stood up and examined him, felt his neck, his armpits, his abdomen. She was gentle but thorough. I watched her face, trying to read her expression, trying to find some hint of what she was thinking. Finally, she sat back down and looked at both of us. I am going to be very honest with you both, she said. Ethan's blood work shows some abnormalities that concern me. His white blood cell count is very high, and the cells do not look normal. I need to do more tests to be certain, but I believe Ethan may have leukemia. The word hung in the air like smoke. Leukemia. Cancer. My son has cancer. My hands gripped the arms of the chair so hard, my knuckles turned white. I could feel the plastic edge digging into my palms. The only thing keeping me anchored to the chair, to the room, to reality. My stomach dropped. It was not a gentle sinking. It was a violent plunge, as if the floor had opened beneath me and I was falling through empty space. I could not breathe. The air would not come. My chest tightened. My throat closed. I opened my mouth, but nothing happened. The fluorescent lights above seemed impossibly bright, almost blinding. They hummed with a sound I had never noticed before, a high-pitched whine that suddenly filled my entire world. The pediatric murals on the walls, the smiling animals, the cheerful rainbows, now felt obscene. Mocking. How dare they be so bright and colorful in a room where my son's life was being dismantled? The clinical smell of the hospital room pressed in on me. Antiseptic, sterile, cold. It filled my nostrils and made my stomach turn. My vision began to narrow, tunneling inward until all I could see was Dr. Patel's mouth moving, her words reaching me as if from very far away. The edges of my sight blurred. The room tilted slightly, then righted itself, then tilted again. My hand reached out and gripped Ethan's leg. I needed to touch him. I needed to know he was real, that this was real, that I was not having a stroke or a heart attack or some kind of psychotic break. What does that mean? Ethan asked. His voice was small, scared. Am I going to die? No, Dr. Patel said firmly. You are not going to die. Leukemia is very treatable, especially in young people, but we need to start treatment as soon as possible. The words seemed to come from underwater. Muffled, distant, but then they sharpened. They became crystal clear. Every syllable cut like glass. I could hear the papers on her desk. The sound of her pen clicking, the soft hum of the machines monitoring Ethan's vitals. Every small sound became hyper-clear, magnified, as if my hearing had suddenly sharpened to an impossible degree. I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. I could hear the blood rushing in my own ears. What kind of treatment? I asked. My voice sounded strange. Distant, like it was coming from someone else's mouth. Like I was listening to myself from very far away. Chemotherapy, possibly radiation. We will need to do a bone marrow biopsy to confirm the diagnosis and determine exactly what type of leukemia we are dealing with. But I want you both to know that the survival rates for pediatric leukemia are very good. We have excellent treatment protocols. We have every reason to be optimistic. Optimistic, that word. She was talking about my son having cancer and using the word optimistic. The warmth was draining from my body. I could feel it leaving, pooling somewhere in my chest, leaving my extremities cold and numb. My fingers were ice. My face felt like it belonged to someone else. The color was draining from my cheeks. I could feel it happening. The blood retreating from my skin, leaving me pale and hollow. Tears formed in my eyes but did not fall. They gathered at the corners, caught between my eyelids and my cheeks, suspended in the moment before breaking. My mouth had gone completely dry. I tried to swallow and could not. My tongue felt like sandpaper against the roof of my mouth. The weight of her words was crushing down on me. Leukemia treatment, bone marrow biopsy, chemotherapy, radiation. Each word was a stone piling on top of me, pressing me deeper into the chair, deeper into this moment, deeper into a life I did not recognize anymore. My body had gone numb, not peaceful numb, shock numb. The kind of numbness that comes when your mind cannot process what your ears are hearing, when reality becomes too large to fit inside your skull. How soon do we start? I asked. I want to admit Ethan today. We will do the biopsy tomorrow morning and start treatment as soon as we have the results. Today, Ethan looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. Mom, I have a math test tomorrow. I have basketball practice. I reached for his hand. We will figure all that out, sweetheart. Right now, we need to focus on getting you better. But I feel fine. I am just tired. This does not make sense. Dr. Patel leaned forward. I know this is scary, Ethan. I know it does not feel real. But your body is sick right now, even if you do not feel it yet. And we need to start fighting this before it gets worse. Do you understand? He nodded, but I could see the tears forming in his eyes. He was trying so hard to be brave, trying to hold it together. Can I have a minute alone with my mom? He asked. Of course. Dr. Patel stood up. I will be right outside. Take all the time you need. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Ethan looked at me, really looked at me. And then he started to cry. Mom, I am scared. I moved to the examination table and wrapped my arms around him. He buried his face in my shoulder and sobbed. My strong, brave boy who never wanted anyone to see him cry. My son who was always so careful to seem older than he was. He cried like a child, like the little boy he still was underneath everything. I know, baby. I know you are scared. I am scared too. What if the treatment does not work? What if I die? You are not going to die. Do you hear me? You are not going to die. We are going to fight this. You and me. We are going to win. How do you know? Because I am your mother, and I will not let anything happen to you. I promise. It was a promise I had no right to make, a promise I had no power to keep. But I made it anyway. because that is what mothers do. We make impossible promises to our children, and then we spend the rest of our lives trying to keep them. He pulled back and wiped his eyes. Okay, we can do this. We can do this together. Together, always. I remember the way Ethan looked at me when Dr. Patel said the word cancer. His eyes were so wide, so scared. He was trying to be brave, trying to hold it together, but I could see the little boy underneath the teenage bravado, the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the little boy who needed his mother to tell him everything would be okay. So that is what I did. I took his hand and I looked him in the eyes and I said, "We are going to fight this. You and me. We are going to win." Dr. Patel came back into the room and we went through the logistics. Admission paperwork, consent forms, treatment plans. She explained everything carefully, making sure we understood each step, and then, almost as an afterthought, she mentioned something else. "There is one more thing I want to discuss with you," she said. She pulled out a folder and opened it on the desk. "There is an experimental treatment protocol that has shown remarkable results in cases like Ethan's. It is a targeted therapy that attacks the cancer cells more precisely than traditional chemotherapy. The survival rate is significantly higher. The side effects are less severe. Recovery time is faster." Hope bloomed in my chest. "That sounds perfect. When can we start?" Dr. Patel's expression shifted, became more careful. "There is a complication. The treatment is still in clinical trials. The pharmaceutical company has not received FDA approval yet, which means it is not covered by insurance. The cost would be entirely out of pocket." The hope died as quickly as it had appeared. "How much?" I asked. She hesitated. Then she wrote a number on a piece of paper and slid it across the desk. I stared at that number. $72,000 for the full treatment protocol, 18 months of medication, monitoring and care. $72,000. It might as well have been $1 million. It might as well have been the moon. There was no possible way I could afford it. I was a single mother working as a part-time administrative assistant. I lived paycheck to paycheck. I had maybe $800 in my savings account. "I understand this is a significant financial burden," Dr. Patel said gently, "and I want to be clear that the standard treatment protocol is also very effective. Ethan will receive excellent care either way, but if you can find a way to afford the experimental treatment, I believe it gives him the best possible chance." I looked at my son, at his scared eyes, at the way he was gripping my hand like I was the only solid thing in a world that had just turned to quicksand, and I knew I would find a way. "We will do it," I said. "Whatever it takes. We will do it," Dr. Patel nodded slowly. She had seen this before, mothers making impossible promises. "I will have my office manager draw up the payment plan options. We can work with you, Mrs. Chen. We want Ethan to have the best possible chance." "Thank you. The standard treatment will begin immediately. If you decide to proceed with the experimental protocol, we can integrate it into his care plan within the next few weeks. Take some time to think about it, talk to your family, explore your options." But I did not need time. I did not need to think about it. I already knew what I was going to do. I was going to save my son's life, no matter what it cost me. That night, after Ethan had been admitted and settled into his hospital room, after the nurses had checked his vitals and started his IV, after he had finally fallen asleep with the television playing softly in the background, I sat in the chair by his bed and stared at that number. $72,000. $4,000 a month for 18 months. I made $2,300 a month at my current job. The math did not work. It could not work unless I made it work. Some decisions do not feel like decisions at all. They feel like the only possible path forward, like standing at the edge of a cliff with your child in your arms and realizing the only way to save them is to learn to fly. I called my supervisor the next morning and told her I was resigning. She was shocked. I had been a reliable employee for 7 years. But I could not explain the real reason. I could not tell her that her paycheck, as steady as it was not enough to save my son's life, that I needed to find work that paid more. Work that could be stacked, and layered and pieced together into something that might actually cover the impossible cost of keeping Ethan alive. "Is everything okay?" she asked, concern in her voice. "My family needs me," I said. It was the truth. Just not the whole truth. I pulled out my phone and called my sister Rachel. It was late, almost 11 at night, but she answered on the second ring. "Margot, what is wrong?" "Ethan has leukemia." Silence. Then, "Oh my God." "Oh, Margot, I am so sorry. Is he okay? Where are you?" "We are at County General. They admitted him tonight. They are starting treatment tomorrow. I am coming. I will leave right now. I can be there in 3 hours." "No, Rachel, no, you do not need to do that. I just needed to hear your voice." "Margot, your son has cancer. I am coming, Rachel. Please, I need you to stay there. I need to know that when everything starts falling apart, there is still someone I can call. Right now, I just need to talk." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, talk to me. Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the diagnosis, the treatment plan, the experimental therapy, the cost, $72,000. Rachel's voice was sharp with disbelief. "How are you supposed to come up with that kind of money?" "I do not know, but I will figure it out." "Margot, that is impossible. You cannot afford that." "I have to afford it. It is his best chance." "What about David? Can he help?" I laughed bitterly. "David has not paid child support in 3 years. He is not going to suddenly show up with $72,000. Have you asked him?" "No, and I am not going to. He made his choice when he left. I am not going to beg him to care about his own son." Rachel sighed. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to find a way. I will get another job, 2 jobs, whatever it takes." "Margot, I am not discussing this." "Rachel, I am doing it. I just wanted you to know what was happening. I can help. I have some savings. Not much, but no. You have your own family, your own bills. I am not taking your money. You are my sister. Ethan is my nephew. Let me help. You are helping. By being there. By listening. That is enough." It was not enough. Nothing was enough. But it was all I could accept. We talked for another hour. She told me about her kids, about her husband, about the ordinary problems of ordinary life. It was comforting, a reminder that the world was still turning even though mine had just stopped. When we finally hung up, I sat in the darkness of Ethan's hospital room and watched him sleep. His face was peaceful, innocent. He had no idea what was coming. The pain, the fear, the fight, and he had no idea what I was about to do to keep him alive. The next morning, while Ethan was in surgery for his bone marrow biopsy, I went to the hospital's human resources department. "I am looking for a job," I told the woman at the desk. "Her name tag," said Linda. She had kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "What kind of position are you looking for?" "Anything. I have some nursing training. I never finished my degree, but I have clinical experience. I recently left my previous position to focus on finding work that would allow me to earn more. I need flexibility and better hourly rates." Linda typed something into her computer. "We have a patient care technician position available on the pediatric floor. Night shift, midnight to 8 in the morning. The pay is $18 an hour." I did the math quickly in my head. $18 an hour, 8 hours a night, 5 nights a week. That was $720 a week, almost $3,000 a month. Combined with whatever other work I could find, that would be a start. Just barely a start. I will take it. Linda looked surprised. "Do you not want to know more about the position, the responsibilities, the requirements? I will do whatever you need me to do." "When can I start?" She studied me for a moment. Then her expression softened. "Your son is a patient here. Is he not?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "I understand," she said quietly. "Let me see what I can do." She made some phone calls, pulled some strings. By the time Ethan was out of surgery, I had a job. I would start training the following week. I did not tell Ethan. Not yet. He had enough to worry about. The biopsy confirmed what Dr. Patel had suspected. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, aggressive but treatable. They started chemotherapy immediately. I watched my son go through hell. The nausea, the exhaustion, the hair loss. He was so sick, so weak. But he fought. Every day he fought, and every day I worked. I would spend the day with him at the hospital, hold his hand during treatments, read to him when he could not sleep, bring him food he could not eat. And then, at 10:30 at night, I would kiss him goodbye and tell him I would see him in the morning. Mrs. Kowalski, our neighbor, would come and sit with him overnight. She was a widow with insomnia who had known Ethan since he was a baby. She refused to let me pay her. "You are doing what any mother would do," she said. "Let me help." So I let her help. Because I had no choice, I would leave the hospital and drive to the pediatric floor where I worked. I would change into scrubs and spend the next 8 hours caring for other people's children, checking vitals, changing bedpans, comforting scared kids in the middle of the night. The irony was not lost on me. I was a mother working nights at a children's hospital, surrounded by sick kids, while my own sick kid was 3 floors above me. But the paycheck was bigger, and that was what mattered. My supervisor on the night shift was a man named Mr. Torres. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and a calm demeanor that made everyone around him feel safe. He noticed things. He paid attention. One night, about 3 weeks into my new job, he found me sitting in the break room at 4 in the morning. I was supposed to be on my break, but I had fallen asleep with my head on the table. "Margot." His voice was gentle. "Wake up." I jerked awake, disoriented. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." I just closed my eyes for a second. "It is okay. You are on break. You are allowed to rest." He sat down across from me. "But I am worried about you." "You look exhausted." "I am fine." "You are not fine. You have been here 3 weeks, and I have watched you get thinner and paler every single shift." "What is going on?" I wanted to lie, to brush it off. But I was so tired of carrying everything alone. "My son is a patient here," I said quietly. "He has leukemia. I am working nights so I can afford his treatment." Mr. Torres' expression shifted. Understanding, compassion. "I am so sorry. How old is he?" 14. "That is hard, really hard. I am managing." "Are you?" "Because from where I am sitting, it looks like you are running yourself into the ground. I do not have a choice. There are always choices." "Margot, maybe not good ones, but choices. Not for me, not right now." He nodded slowly. "Okay, but I want you to know that if you need anything, if you need to adjust your schedule or take time off, you come talk to me. We will figure something out." "Thank you. And Margot, take care of yourself. Your son needs you alive and healthy. Not just present." I knew he was right, but I did not know how to do what he was asking. I did not know how to take care of myself when every ounce of energy I had was going toward keeping Ethan alive. For a few weeks, it almost worked. I would come home at 7:30 in the morning, exhausted but functional. Ethan would be getting ready for his day at the hospital. I would sit with him during his morning treatment. We would talk. I would hold his hand. And then I would go home, sleep for a few hours, and be back at the hospital by early afternoon. It was not perfect, but it was manageable, until I realized it still was not enough. The medical bills kept coming. The treatment was working, thank God, but every appointment came with another invoice. Medications, lab work, scans. The experimental therapy itself, even with the payment plan, I was drowning. I needed more money. I found a morning job at a coffee shop downtown, a place called Morning Brew 6, in the morning to 10 in the morning. 4 hours. Minimum wage plus tips. It was not much, but it was something. The owner was a woman named Patricia. She was in her 60s, with dyed red hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She looked at my application and then looked at me. "You have another job," she said. It was not a question. Yes. What hours nights? Midnight to 8, she raised an eyebrow. So you would be coming here straight from your night shift? Yes. That is not sustainable. I need the job. She studied me for a long moment. Then she sighed. Fine, but if you fall asleep on my customers, you are fired. Understood. Understood. Thank you. My new schedule looked like this. Leave for the hospital at midnight. Work until 8 in the morning. Drive straight to the coffee shop. Work from 8:30 until 12:30 in the afternoon. Go home. Sleep from 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 4:30 in the afternoon. Wake up, shower, change my clothes. Ethan would be home by 5 o'clock. On treatment days, he came back from the oncology clinic exhausted, sometimes nauseous, sometimes in pain from the chemotherapy. On non-treatment days, he was home from his online classes, trying to keep up with schoolwork when his body allowed it. Either way, I had him from 5 o'clock until midnight. 7 hours. 420 minutes. That was real time. That was presence. That was enough, I told myself. That was enough to sustain us both. I would make dinner. We would eat together at the kitchen table. I would ask him about his day, about his treatment, about how he was feeling. Sometimes he would talk, sometimes he would not. But we were together, in the same room, breathing the same air, that had to count for something. After dinner, we would sit on the couch. Sometimes we watched television. Sometimes we just sat in silence. I would rest my head on his shoulder, and he would let me. These were the moments I lived for. These 7 hours were the reason I could survive the other 17. I told myself this schedule was temporary, just until we got ahead of the bills, just until Ethan finished his treatment, just until things got easier. I did not know yet that this was not going to be enough. The coffee shop was busy, relentless, people rushing in before work, demanding their complicated orders, annoyed when I moved too slowly or made a mistake. I smiled and took orders and made lattes and pretended I was not about to collapse. There was one regular customer who came in every morning at 8:30, an older man named George. He always ordered the same thing, black coffee, no sugar. He would sit at the corner table and read the newspaper for exactly 30 minutes. One morning, about 2 weeks into my new job, he looked up from his paper and said, "You look terrible." I laughed despite myself. "Thank you. That is exactly what every woman wants to hear." "I am serious. You look like you have not slept in a month." "I am fine," I told him. "You are not fine. What is going on?" I do not know why I told him. Maybe because he was a stranger. Maybe because I was too tired to lie. Maybe because I needed someone, anyone, to acknowledge what I was going through. "My son has cancer," I said. "I am working 2 jobs to pay for his treatment." George set down his newspaper. "How old is your son?" 14. "That is rough." "I am sorry. Thank you. How much do you need?" The question caught me off guard. "What? How much money do you need for the treatment?" "I cannot ask you for money." "You did not ask," I offered. "How much?" $72,000. He whistled low. "That is a lot, I know." He pulled out his wallet and took out 2 $20 bills. He put them in the tip jar. "It is not much, but it is something." I felt tears prick my eyes. "You do not have to do that." "I know, but I want to." "Good luck, Margot. I hope your son gets better." "Thank you after that." George always left a generous tip, sometimes $20, sometimes $50. Once, $100. He never mentioned it, never made a big deal of it, just left the money and went back to his newspaper. Those tips helped, not enough to make a real difference in the bills, but enough to buy groceries, enough to put gas in my car, enough to remind me that there was still kindness in the world. Ethan started to notice I was gone more. He would ask me where I was going so early in the morning. I told him I had picked up some extra shifts at work. He accepted that answer because he was 14 and still trusted me completely. But I could see the confusion in his eyes. The hurt. He did not understand why I was never there anymore. One afternoon, I came home from the coffee shop to find him sitting on the couch, still wearing his jacket. His backpack was on the floor beside him. The hospital wristband was still on his arm. Pale blue paper against pale skin. He was staring at the television, but the screen was black. He was not watching anything. He was just staring. My chest tightened the moment I saw him. "Hey, sweetheart!" I dropped my purse on the counter, my hands trembling from exhaustion. I had been awake since 7:30 that morning. My feet ached. My back ached. Everything ached. How was treatment today? He did not look at me. Fine. Just fine. Yeah, I sat down next to him, close enough to touch him, but not quite touching. The couch cushions sank beneath my weight. I could smell the antiseptic scent clinging to his clothes, that sharp, sterile hospital smell that never quite washed out. "Do you want to talk about it?" "Not really, Ethan." I reached for his hand, but he pulled it away. "What is wrong?" He turned to look at me then. His eyes were red-rimmed, not from crying, from something worse, from holding back tears for hours. "Where were you this morning?" My stomach dropped. "I told you. I had to work. I know you had to work." His voice was flat, hollow. "I am asking where you were when I was getting my infusion." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Ethan, I waited for you." He was not yelling. That would have been easier. He was just stating facts, cold, detached. "I sat in that chair for 3 hours. I watched them put the needle in. I watched the bag drip. I watched all the other kids with their parents sitting next to them. And I waited for you to show up. I am so sorry. I had to. You had to work. I know." He turned back to the black television screen. "You are always working now. You are never here. I am here right now. For how long?" His jaw tightened. I could see the muscle working beneath his skin. "An hour, 2 hours before you have to leave again. I am doing the best I can, are you?" His voice was sharp. "Because it feels like you are avoiding me. I am not avoiding you. I am working so we can pay for your treatment. We have insurance. Why do you need to work so much?" I could not tell him. Not yet. He was still so sick, still so fragile. He did not need the weight of knowing how much his life was costing. "I just do," I said weakly. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned back to the television. "Whatever." I wanted to reach for him, to pull him close, to explain everything, but I could not, so I just sat there, feeling the distance between us grow. But then everything got worse. 6 months into treatment, Dr. Patel called me into her office after one of Ethan's routine monitoring scans. The moment I saw her face, I knew something was wrong. "Sit down, Margot." I sat. My hands gripped the armrests of the chair. The leather was cold beneath my palms. "What is it? Is the cancer back?" "No, not exactly." She pulled up images on her computer screen, charts, numbers. Things I did not understand. The scans show what we call minimal residual disease. MRD. It means there are still leukemic cells present in Ethan's system. Not enough to be considered active cancer, but enough to be concerning. My throat closed. What does that mean? It means the treatment is working, but not as completely as we had hoped. These lingering cells could lead to relapse if we do not eliminate them entirely. So what do we do? Dr. Patel folded her hands on his desk. Her wedding ring caught the fluorescent light. "We extend the treatment. Another 6 months of the experimental protocol. But this time, we have to intensify it significantly. 6 more months. 6 more months." The words echoed in my head like a death sentence. "How much?" My voice sounded hollow. Distant, like it was coming from someone else's body. She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "The cost will be approximately $60,000 over the 6-month period." I stared at her. $60,000 for 6 months. The first 18 months cost $72,000. I know it seems disproportionate." She leaned forward, her expression pained. "But the MRD protocol is different from standard treatment. We have to escalate the intensity dramatically. Higher dosages of the experimental drugs. More aggressive infusion schedules. Instead of treatment every 2 weeks, we are looking at weekly sessions. Sometimes twice weekly. Why? Because we are not just treating active cancer anymore. We are hunting down individual cells that are hiding in his system. It requires precision, intensity. We will need PET scans every 3 weeks instead of every 2 months. Comprehensive blood work twice a week. Consultations with additional specialists to monitor for complications. The side effects at this level of treatment become more severe, which means more medications to manage them, more hospital visits, more monitoring. I could not breathe. The room felt too small, too hot, Margot. I would not recommend this if it were not absolutely critical. Without this intensified protocol, the likelihood of relapse is significant. We are talking about Ethan's survival. Is there any other option? Not one I would feel comfortable recommending. This is his best chance. I nodded. My vision blurred. I blinked and a tear fell onto my lap, darkening the fabric of my jeans. Okay, I whispered. Okay, we will do it. I know this is an impossible burden. When do we start? Next week, I will have my office coordinator send you the updated treatment schedule and the financial breakdown. I stood. My legs felt unsteady. The room tilted slightly, and I gripped the edge of his desk to steady myself. Thank you, Dr. Patel, Margot. She stood as well. You are doing everything right. You are saving your son's life. I nodded again, because I could not speak. If I spoke, I would break. And I could not afford to break, not yet. I made it to my car before the tears came. I sat in the parking lot of the oncology clinic with my hands on the steering wheel and I cried. I cried so hard my chest hurt. I cried until my throat was raw. I cried until there was nothing left inside me but emptiness and exhaustion. 6 more months. $60,000 more. Nearly as much money for 6 months as I had paid for the entire first 18 months. Because the treatment had to become more aggressive, more intense, more expensive, more money, always more money. I could not do this. I could not survive this. I was already barely holding on, but what choice did I have? Let my son die. Let those lingering cancer cells multiply and take him from me. No. No, I would not do that. I would never do that. I would find a way. I always found a way. The tears slowed. My breathing steadied, and my mind began to move through the impossible calculations with the cold precision of someone who had no other option. I was already working 12 hours a day between the hospital and the coffee shop. I was already sleeping 3.5 hours a night. I was already stretched so thin I could barely function. But I needed more money, and there were only so many hours in a day. I stared through the windshield at nothing. At the gray concrete, at the other cars in the lot, at the people walking past who had no idea that inside this vehicle, a mother was calculating the exact price of her son's survival. The math did not work, no matter how I arranged it, no matter how I tried to stretch the hours, or cut the sleep, or find some hidden pocket of time I had missed. Unless I took a third job, the thought made me physically ill. But what else could I do? A cleaning company that serviced office buildings downtown, 7:30 at night to 11:30 at night, 4 hours. Just 4 hours. I could do that. I could fit that in between getting home from the coffee shop and leaving for the hospital. The company was called Sunrise Cleaning Services. The manager was a man named Rick. He was young, maybe 30, with a tired face and a cigarette always hanging from his lips. "You have experience?" he asked when I came in for the interview. "No, but I am a hard worker. I will do whatever you need. The shift is 7:30 at night to 11:30 at night. 4 nights a week. Minimum wage, no benefits. You okay with that?" "Yes, I am. You have another job." "2, he raised an eyebrow. 2 jobs, and you want a third." "I need the money. Must be pretty desperate." "Yes, I am desperate," he shrugged. "Fine. You start Monday. Do not be late. Do not call in sick. Do not screw up. Got it, got it. And I nodded. But my hands were already trembling. I pressed my palms flat against my thighs, trying to steady them, but I could feel the shake running through my entire body like an electric current. My throat tightened. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed their mechanical song, and I became acutely aware of how small the office was, how the walls seemed to be closing in. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, loud and frantic, like a bird trapped in a cage. This was real now. This was actually happening. I would work the coffee shop from 8:30 to 12:30 in the afternoon. Go home. Sleep from 1 in the afternoon to 4:30 in the afternoon. Be awake when Ethan got home from the hospital. Spend the evening with him from 5 to 7 at night. Leave at 7:30. Clean offices until 11:30 at night. Drive to the hospital. Work from midnight to 8 in the morning. Drive to the coffee shop, start over. I was working nearly 100 hours a week. I did not tell Ethan about the cleaning job. I did not tell anyone except my sister Rachel, who lived 3 hours away and called me every week to check in. Margot, this is going to kill you, she said when I told her. It is keeping him alive, I said. That is all that matters. What good is keeping him alive if you are not alive to be his mother? I did not have an answer for that, so I just kept going. The cleaning job was brutal, emptying trash cans, vacuuming floors, scrubbing toilets. My hands were raw from chemicals, my back ached from bending, my feet throbbed from standing. But I did it. Every night, 4 hours of mindless, exhausting work. And then I would drive to the hospital and do it all over again. There were nights I fell asleep at red lights. Nights I could not remember the drive home. Nights I woke up in my car in the hospital parking lot with no memory of how I got there. I was running on fumes, on desperation, on the sheer force of will that comes from being a mother who refuses to let her child die. Pain changes shape when it stays too long. Eventually it stops feeling like a wound and starts feeling like furniture. Something you walk around every day without noticing how much space it takes. Ethan was in remission within 8 months. The experimental treatment worked. His cancer was gone. Dr. Patel called it a miracle. I called it worth it. But by then, the damage was already done. Ethan had started to pull away from me. It happened slowly, so slowly I did not notice it at first. He stopped waiting up for me in the evenings. He stopped telling me about his day. When I asked him questions, he gave me one-word answers. How was school? Fine. Did you finish your homework? Yeah. Do you want to watch a movie tonight? I am tired. He was not tired. He was angry. I could see it in the way he looked at me. Or rather, the way he did not look at me. He looked past me, through me, like I was a stranger who happened to live in his house. I told myself it was normal teenage behavior. Boys his age pulled away from their mothers. It was developmentally appropriate. It did not mean anything. But deep down, I knew better. One evening, I came home from the coffee shop to find him in the kitchen making himself dinner. A frozen pizza. He had not waited for me. Hey, sweetheart, I was going to make dinner. I was hungry. I can make you something better than frozen pizza. This is fine. His voice was flat. He did not turn around. I set my purse down on the counter. The zipper clinked against the tile. Ethan, can we talk? About what? About us. About how you have been pulling away. He took the pizza out of the oven, the heat making his face flush. The smell of cheap cheese and processed dough filled the kitchen. He cut it into slices with sharp, angry movements. The knife scraped against the pan. I have not been pulling away. You have been gone. I know I have been working a lot, but it is temporary. Things will get better soon. You have been saying that for months. He finally looked at me. His jaw was tight. His eyes were hard. Every single time I ask you when things are going to change, you say soon. But nothing ever changes. You are still never here. I am here right now. For how long? His voice rose. An hour, 2 hours before you disappear again. I am not disappearing. I am working. Where? The question came out sharp and desperate. He set the knife down and turned to face me fully. Where are you working that you have to leave before I wake up and come home after I go to bed? Where are you that you cannot come to my appointments anymore? Where are you that matters more than being here? My throat tightened. I could feel my pulse in my neck. I am working at the hospital. You know that. The hospital does not need you 24 hours a day. Mom. Other nurses have normal schedules. Other nurses are home for dinner. Other nurses show up to their kids' lives. His hands were shaking. He shoved them into his pockets. So where are you really? What are you doing that is so important you cannot even be here? I am doing what I have to do. That is not an answer. His voice cracked. That is what you always say. But you never actually tell me anything. You just leave. Over and over. You just leave. I took a step toward him. Ethan, I know this is hard. Hard, he laughed. But there was no humor in it. Only pain. You think this is just hard, Mom. I feel like I am living alone. I wake up and you are gone. I come home from school and you are gone. I eat dinner by myself. I do my homework by myself. I go to bed by myself. And when you are here, you are so tired you can barely keep your eyes open. You look at me like you are trying to remember who I am. That is not true. Yes, it is. Tears were forming in his eyes now. He blinked them back furiously. You do not ask me about school anymore. You do not know what is going on in my life. You do not know that I got an A on my history project, or that I tried out for the debate team, or that I have been having nightmares again about the hospital. My chest tightened. You have been having nightmares. See, you did not even know. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Because you are never here. And when you are here, you are too exhausted to notice anything. I am sorry. I am doing the best I can, are you? The question hung in the air between us, because it does not feel like it. It feels like you are doing everything you can to avoid being around me. That is not true. Then, what is it? His voice broke completely now. What is so wrong with me that you would rather be anywhere else? What did I do that made you stop wanting to be my mom? The words were a knife to my heart. I felt my own tears rising. You did not do anything. This has nothing to do with you. Then what is it about? Why are you always gone? Why do you look so tired all the time? Why do you flinch every time the mail comes? Why do you cry in the shower when you think I cannot hear you? He was breathing hard now, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Something is wrong. I know something is wrong, but you will not tell me what it is. You just keep leaving. You just keep pretending everything is fine when it is not. I wanted to tell him, God. I wanted to tell him everything. But I could not. If I told him about the bills, about the debt, about the experimental treatment costs that were drowning us, he would blame himself. He would think his cancer had ruined everything. He would carry that guilt for the rest of his life. I cannot explain right now, I said quietly. But I need you to trust me. Trust you? He stared at me like I was a stranger. How can I trust you when you will not even be honest with me? How can I trust you when you are never here? Ethan, please, forget it. He picked up his plate. His hands were trembling so badly. The pizza slices slid to one side. I do not want to talk about this anymore. Ethan, please, let me explain. You just said you cannot explain. His voice was hollow now, defeated. So there is nothing to talk about. You do not want to be around me. I get it. Just stop pretending you care. He walked toward his room. His footsteps were heavy on the floor. Each one felt like a door closing between us. Ethan, he went into his room and closed the door. Not a slam. Just a quiet, final click. I stood in the kitchen, alone, staring at the space where he had been. The oven was still warm. The smell of pizza still hung in the air. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the window before disappearing into the dark. He thought I did not care. He thought I did not want to be around him. He thought I was avoiding him, and I could not tell him the truth. I could not explain that every moment I was gone, I was thinking about him. That every shift, every exhausting hour was for him, that I was not avoiding him. I was saving him. But he did not know that, and my silence was killing us. One night, about 10 months into my 3-job schedule, I came home from the coffee shop and found Ethan sitting at the kitchen table. It was 10:15 in the morning. He should have been at school. "Why are you home?" I asked. He did not look up. "I did not feel like going, Ethan." "You cannot just skip school because you do not feel like it." "Why not? You skip being my mom all the time." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there in the doorway, still holding my purse, still smelling like coffee and exhaustion. "That is not fair," I said quietly. "Is it not?" He finally looked at me. His eyes were red. He had been crying. "When was the last time you were actually here, Mom? And I do not mean physically in the house. I mean here, present. Paying attention to me, I am always paying attention to you. You are always working. You are always tired. You are always leaving." His voice cracked. "I had a follow-up appointment with Dr. Patel last week. Do you even remember that?" I did remember. I had taken him. I had sat in the waiting room. I had listened to Dr. Patel say that everything looked good, that he was still in remission, that we should be so proud. Of course I remember. I said, "I was there. You were there physically. But you fell asleep in the waiting room. You did not hear anything," Dr. Patel said. "I had to tell you everything in the car on the way home, and you still barely listened because you were worried about getting to your next shift on time." I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to explain, but he was right. I had fallen asleep. I had been so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open. "I am sorry," I said. "I am doing the best I can." "Are you?" He stood up. His hands were shaking, because from where I am standing, it looks like you are doing everything you can to avoid being around me. That is not true. Then why are you never here? Why do you have so many jobs? We are not rich, but we are not starving either. Why do you need to work so much? I could not tell him. I could not explain that every extra shift, every extra dollar, was going toward keeping him alive. That the reason I was never home was because I was paying for the treatment that saved his life. The doctors had told me not to burden him with the financial details. He was a kid. He had been sick. He needed to focus on healing, not on money, so I had kept it from him. And now that secret was a wall between us. I just do, I said weakly. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle working beneath his skin. Then he shook his head, slow and deliberate, as if he could not believe what he was hearing. His eyes glistened with tears that had not yet fallen. "You do not even care anymore. Do you, Ethan? Forget it." He turned away from me, his shoulders rigid with tension. He walked past me toward his bedroom, and I could see his hands curling into fists at his sides. The distance between us felt like it was growing with every step he took. "Ethan, wait! Please! Let me drive you." "I do not want you to drive me. I do not want anything from you. Please do not say that." His voice had changed. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something worse. Hurt, deep, bone, deep, hurt. He stopped at the doorway and turned back to look at me. His face was wet with tears now, streaks running down his cheeks. His reflection caught in the kitchen window behind him. A ghost of a boy I barely recognized anymore. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. "Do you even love me anymore?" The question shattered me. It landed like a physical blow. My breath caught in my throat. I could not speak for a moment. The breakfast dishes were still on the table between us, cold and forgotten. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the seconds of my silence. "Of course I love you. Ethan, I love you more than anything in this world." "Then prove it." His voice cracked on the words. "Because right now it feels like you are just saying what you are supposed to say. Why do you act like being around me is a chore? Why do you look at me like you wish you were somewhere else?" I do not. Yes, you do. He stepped closer to me, and I could see the pain written across his face, raw and unguarded. Every time I try to talk to you, you are checking your phone or looking at the clock or thinking about your next shift. You are here, but you are not here, and I do not understand why. I do not understand what I did wrong. You did not do anything wrong. This is not about you. Then what is it about? His hands were shaking now, his whole body trembling with emotion. Because I have been trying to figure it out for months and I cannot. All I know is that my mom does not want to be around me anymore, and I do not know how to fix it. There is nothing to fix. I am just tired. I am just working too much. But it is temporary. I promise. You keep saying that. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, but the tears kept coming. But nothing changes. You just keep working more and more, and I keep being alone more and more. And I am tired of it. I am tired of feeling like I do not matter to you. You matter to me. You are everything to me. Then prove it. Quit one of your jobs. Be here. Be my mom again. People think sacrifice feels noble while you are making it. It does not. Most sacrifices do not arrive wearing courage. They arrive wearing guilt. They arrive looking like the person you love most standing in front of you, begging for something you desperately want to give them. An hour, a conversation, a quiet evening on the couch. A mother who is not always exhausted. The cruel thing about survival is that sometimes it asks you to choose between two heartbreaks, the heartbreak of staying or the heartbreak of leaving. And no matter which one you choose, somebody you love ends up hurting. I wanted to tell him that every shift I worked felt like a theft, that every movie I missed, every dinner I skipped, every moment I spent somewhere else. I felt it, I carried it, I hated it. But illness has a way of changing the rules. Suddenly love is no longer measured by how often you are present. Sometimes it is measured by what you are willing to endure when nobody sees it. Sometimes love looks less like holding someone's hand and more like breaking your own heart to keep theirs beating. I wanted to, God, I wanted to, but I could not. The bills were still coming. The debt was still there. The experimental treatment that was keeping him alive was still not covered. Every appointment, every medication, every test, every impossible number printed on every impossible bill. All of it was still waiting for me. If I quit, we would lose everything. We would lose the house. We would lose the ability to pay for his follow-up care. We would lose everything I had been fighting for. But I could not tell him that. I could not place that weight on his shoulders. Not now. Not while he was still fighting to heal. So I just stood there, silent, watching him wait for an answer I could not give. My hand reached toward him, then dropped. The coldness between us felt like a living thing. That is what I thought, he said finally. His voice was quieter now, which somehow made it worse. The anger was gone. All that remained was hurt. You cannot even promise me that, because work is more important than I am. My chest tightened. That is not true. The words came out immediately, too quickly, as if speaking them faster could somehow make them more believable. His eyes locked onto mine, searching, waiting. Then prove it. The refrigerator hummed softly behind us. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard settled. The ordinary sounds felt impossibly loud. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came, because the truth sitting inside my chest could not be spoken without breaking everything. I cannot. The last word barely made it past my lips. His shoulders sagged. Not with surprise, not with anger, with disappointment, as if some final piece of hope had quietly let go. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just pain, just the sound of a boy whose mother had chosen something else. At least you are honest, he left. He walked toward his bedroom, his shoulders hunched, his movements heavy with the weight of everything unsaid between us. The front door closed behind him a moment later, and I stood in the kitchen, alone, my hand still suspended in the air where I had tried to reach for him. The breakfast dishes stared back at me. The clock kept ticking, and I wondered how I had managed to save my son's life while losing him completely. Nobody warns you that a child can mistake sacrifice for abandonment when all they can see is your absence. There is a special kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who need you while the person you need most is slipping away. I spent my nights caring for children whose mothers sat beside their beds, holding their hands, reading them stories. I watched those mothers and I envied them. Not because their children were sick, but because they were allowed to be present, they were allowed to be there. I was saving my son by being absent, and he was interpreting my absence as abandonment. The weeks blurred together. Work, sleep, work, sleep. Brief moments with Ethan that felt more like obligations than connections. He stopped talking to me almost entirely. He ate dinner in his room. He left for school before I woke up. He went to bed before I got home from the cleaning job. We were living in the same house, but we might as well have been strangers. My sister Rachel called me one night while I was driving between the cleaning job and the hospital. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I am fine, Margot." "You are not fine. You sound like you are about to collapse." "I am just tired." "You are always tired." "When was the last time you had a day off?" I could not remember. "I do not need a day off. I need to keep working." "Why, Ethan is in remission. The treatment worked. You did it. You saved him. Why are you still killing yourself?" "Because the bills have not stopped. Because I am still paying off the treatment. Because if I stop now, everything I have done will have been for nothing." Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What is the point of saving his life if he grows up hating you?" I did not answer. I could not. "Talk to him," Rachel said. "Tell him the truth. He is 14 years old. He can handle it. I cannot." "Why not?" "Because if I tell him, he will feel guilty. He will blame himself. He will think his cancer ruined my life." "Margot, your silence is ruining your relationship with him. That is worse. I do not know how to fix this." "Yes, you do. You tell him the truth. You let him see what you have been doing. You let him understand that every moment you were gone, you were fighting for him. You let him carry some of the weight instead of carrying it all alone. He is just a kid. He is 14. He is not a kid anymore, and he deserves to know why his mother has been absent. He deserves to know that it was not because you did not love him. It was because you loved him too much." Maybe she was right. But I did not know how to have that conversation. I did not know how to bridge the gap that had grown between us. So I just kept going, kept working, kept pretending everything was fine, until the night Ethan found the pay stub. I had been careless, exhausted. I came home from the hospital one morning and emptied my pockets on the kitchen counter. My keys, my phone, a crumpled pay stub from the cleaning company. I went to bed without putting it away. Ethan found it that afternoon. I woke up to him standing in my bedroom doorway, holding the piece of paper in his hand. The afternoon light was streaming through the window behind him, turning him into a silhouette, a dark shape, a shadow of my son for a moment. I thought I was dreaming. "What is this?" he asked. I sat up, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The blanket twisted around my legs as I moved. "What are you doing in my room? What is this?" he asked again. His voice was shaking. The pay stub trembled slightly in his fingers. Sunrise Cleaning Services. 7:30 at night to 11:30 at night, 4 nights a week. I did not say anything. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to say, how to explain. My stomach dropped, that sick, falling sensation, the one you get when you know everything is about to change. "You have been working 3 jobs. He stepped into the room. The light hit his face, and I could see everything. The confusion first. Then, the realization. Then, the hurt spreading across his features, like a stain. Tears were already gathering in his eyes, making them glisten. "This whole time, you have been working 3 jobs, Ethan. Why did you not tell me? His hands clenched into fists at his sides. His jaw tightened. I could see the muscle working beneath his skin, the physical manifestation of his anger and pain. Because I did not want you to worry. Worry about what money? He laughed, but there was no humor in it, just pain and confusion and anger. His voice cracked on the words. I have been thinking you did not want to be around me. I have been thinking you were avoiding me because you were tired of being my mom. And this whole time you have been working yourself to death. My fingers gripped the edge of the blanket. My throat tightened. I could not swallow. The air in the room felt heavy, pressing down on me. I had to. Why? And there it was. The question I had been avoiding for nearly 2 years. The question I could not answer without breaking the promise I had made to myself. The promise to protect him from the weight of what his illness had cost. But looking at him standing there, holding that pay stub, his eyes full of hurt and confusion, and something that looked like betrayal, I realized that my silence had cost him something far worse than guilt. It had cost him the knowledge that he was loved. Sit down, I said quietly. He hesitated. His body swayed slightly, as if the weight of understanding was physically pushing him off balance. Then he sat on the edge of my bed, still holding the pay stub, like it was evidence in a trial. His hands were shaking. I could see it clearly now that he was closer, now that the light caught him fully. His whole body was trembling. I took a breath. My eyes were already blurring with tears. I blinked them back, but they kept coming. When you were diagnosed, Dr. Patel told us about the experimental treatment, the one that had the best chance of saving your life. Do you remember that? He nodded. He did not look at me. He stared at the pay stub in his hands as if it held all the answers. It was not covered by insurance. The cost was out of pocket. A lot of money. More money than I had, more money than I could ever have. His face went pale. The color drained from his cheeks. His lips pressed into a thin line. How much? It does not matter how much. What matters is that I needed to find a way to pay for it. So I took the night shift at the hospital, and when that was not enough, I took the morning shift at the coffee shop, and when that still was not enough, I took the cleaning job. Mom, every dollar I made went toward your treatment. Every shift, every sleepless night, every moment I was not here with you, I was working to keep you alive. Tears were streaming down his face now. They ran down his cheeks in silent rivers. His shoulders hunched forward. He looked smaller, suddenly, younger, like the weight of understanding was crushing him. Why did you not tell me? Because you were 14 years old and you were fighting cancer. You did not need to carry the weight of how much it cost. You needed to focus on getting better. But I thought, his voice broke completely. It shattered like glass. I thought you did not want to be around me anymore. I thought I had done something wrong. I thought you did not love me. I reached for him and pulled him into my arms. He collapsed against me, sobbing. His whole body shook with the force of it. All the pain and confusion and loneliness he had been carrying for months came pouring out. His tears soaked through my shirt. His breath came in ragged, broken gasps. I could feel his heartbeat against my chest, racing and frantic. I held him tighter. My own tears fell into his hair. My hands moved across his back, trying to hold together the pieces of him that were breaking apart. Some people do not leave your life all at once. They leave in pieces. A little presence today, a little honesty tomorrow. Until one day, all that remains is a familiar face carrying a stranger's hurt. I had done that to my son, not because I did not love him, but because I loved him so much that I could not let him see the cost of that love, and in trying to protect him, I had wounded him in ways I was only now beginning to understand. I am so sorry, I whispered. I am so sorry you thought that. I have never stopped loving you, not for one single second. Everything I did because I love you more than anything in this world. I did not know, he said between sobs. I did not know. I know. I should have told you. I should have let you see what I was doing, but I was trying to protect you. From what? From feeling guilty, from feeling like you were a burden, from feeling like your cancer ruined my life. He pulled back and looked at me. His face was wet with tears. His eyes were red and swollen. Did it ruin your life? No, never. You are my life. Ethan, you are the reason I get up every morning. The reason I keep going. The reason I do everything I do. Your cancer did not ruin my life. It just changed it, and I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. But you are exhausted. You are working yourself to death. How is that not ruined? Because you are alive. Because you are here. Because I get to be your mother. That is not ruined. That is everything. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You should have told me." I know. I could have helped. I could have gotten a job. I could have done something. You were sick. Your job was to get better, and you did. You are here. You are alive. That is all that matters. He shook his head. It is not all that matters. You matter too, Mom. You cannot keep sacrificing everything for me. That is not fair to you. Being your mother is not a sacrifice. It is a privilege, even when it costs you everything. I smiled through my own tears, especially then. He leaned his head on my shoulder. We sat there for a long time, neither of us speaking, just being together, just being present. Finally, he said, "I am sorry I thought you did not love me. I am sorry I made you think that. What do we do now? I do not know. But we will figure it out together." Together, he repeated. I like that. Me too. We sat there until the afternoon light faded into evening. Until the room grew dark and the only sound was our breathing. Until the weight of the secret that had been between us finally lifted. Sacrifice is a strange thing. We think of it as noble, as selfless, as proof of love. But sometimes sacrifice becomes a wall. It becomes the thing that separates us from the people we are trying to protect. We give and give and give until there is nothing left, until the people we love look at us and see a stranger. I had sacrificed my time, my health, my sleep, my presence. I had given everything I had to save my son's life. But in doing so, I had almost lost him anyway, not to cancer, to silence. The next day, I called my supervisor at the cleaning company and quit. I could not keep working 3 jobs. The money was important, but it was not more important than my relationship with my son. Rick was not happy. "You are leaving me short-staffed." "I am sorry, but I have to do this." "Whatever. Good luck finding someone else willing to work those hours." I did not care. I was done. Done with the cleaning. Done with the exhaustion, done with sacrificing my relationship with my son on the altar of survival. I kept the hospital job and the coffee shop job. It was still exhausting, still difficult, but it was manageable, and it meant I could be home in the evenings. I could have dinner with Ethan. I could be present. The bills did not go away. We were still paying off the treatment. We would be paying it off for years. But we would figure it out, together. Ethan got a part-time job at a bookstore near his school. I told him he did not have to. He told me he wanted to. "We are a team," he said. "Remember?" I remembered. We started having our Sunday pancake mornings again. He still insisted on chocolate chips. I still pretended to be scandalized, and then I still added them. The first Sunday morning after everything came out, we stood in the kitchen together. The early light was streaming through the windows, soft and golden, casting long shadows across the counter. Dust particles floated through the beams like tiny dancers. Ethan was cracking eggs into the bowl, his movements careful and deliberate. His hands were still thin from the treatment, the veins visible beneath his skin. I watched him work, noticing how he concentrated on each task as if it mattered deeply. The refrigerator hummed behind us, a steady rhythm that had become the soundtrack of our mornings. "Mom?" His voice was quiet. He did not look up from the bowl. "Yeah, thank you." I set down the measuring cup. The clink of it against the counter seemed too loud in the silence. "For what?" He cracked another egg, his jaw tightening slightly. "For everything. For saving my life. for working so hard, for loving me that much. I felt tears prick my eyes. My throat tightened. You do not have to thank me for that. Yes, I do. He finally looked at me, and I could see his eyes were glistening too, because I know now what it cost you, and I know you would do it again. But I also want you to know that I see you now. I see how hard you worked. I see how much you gave up, and I am grateful. I reached for a paper towel, my hands trembling slightly. The smell of the raw eggs and flour hung between us, ordinary and sacred all at once. I would do it all over again, I said, my voice barely steady. I know. He turned back to the bowl, stirring the eggs with more force than necessary. His shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. But you do not have to anymore. We are going to figure this out together. Okay. I moved closer to him, close enough to see the concentration on his face, the way his lower lip pressed into his upper one as he stirred. He added the chocolate chips to the batter without asking. I did not protest. I could not have spoken if I tried. We made pancakes together, just like we used to. The griddles sizzled as I poured the first batch. The butter melted and browned. The kitchen filled with warmth, and the smell of something being created, instead of something being lost. For the first time in months, it felt like we were a team again. We started talking again. Really talking. Not just surface conversations, but the deep ones. The ones that mattered. He told me about the girl he liked, who apparently did like him back now. Her name was Sophie, and they had been texting for weeks, and he was thinking about asking her to the school dance. You should ask her, I said. What if she says no? Then she says no, but at least you will know. And I think she will say yes. How do you know? Because you are smart and kind and funny, and any girl would be lucky to go to a dance with you. He smiled. You have to say that. You are my mom. I am saying it because it is true. He told me about his fears that the cancer would come back, that the remission would not last, that he would have to go through it all again. Dr. Patel says the chances of recurrence are very low, I reminded him. I know, but I am still scared. That is normal. That is okay. You went through something traumatic. It is going to take time to feel safe again. Do you ever feel scared that it will come back? Every day, I admitted. Every single day. But I also have hope. And I have you, and that is enough. He told me about the guilt he felt knowing how much I had sacrificed for him. I hate that you had to work so hard because of me, he said one night. We were sitting on the couch watching a movie. I hate that my cancer cost you so much. It did not cost me anything. It gave me something. It gave me the chance to fight for you, to show you how much I love you, to prove that there is nothing I would not do to keep you safe. But you were exhausted. You were miserable. I was tired. But I was not miserable, because every shift, every exhausting hour, I knew I was doing it for you. And that made it worth it. I do not know if I could do what you did. You could. If you had to. If someone you loved needed you, you would find a way. That is what love does. It makes us capable of things we never thought possible. I told him the truth. That I would do it all over again. That he was worth every sleepless night, every exhausting shift, every moment of pain. But I also told him that I had learned something. That love is not just about sacrifice. It is also about presence, about being there, about letting the people you love see you, even when you are struggling. I had tried to protect him by hiding my struggle, but in doing so, I had made him feel unloved. I had made him feel like he was not worth my time. That was the real cost of my silence. Not the money, not the exhaustion, but the distance it created between us. Hope is stubborn. It will live in broken houses longer than wisdom ever would. One evening, about 6 months after he found the pay stub, Ethan and I were sitting on the couch watching a movie. It was a comedy, something light and easy. The blue glow from the television cast shadows across his face, softening the angles that had become sharper during his treatment. We were eating popcorn, and the bowl sat between us on the cushion, a small barrier that suddenly felt insignificant. He had been quieter than usual all evening. I noticed the way his fingers moved through the popcorn without really tasting it, the way his eyes kept drifting away from the screen, toward the window, toward nothing in particular. During a quiet moment in the film, he turned to me. His jaw tightened first. I watched him take a breath, the kind of breath you take before you say something that matters. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the popcorn bowl, then stopped. He did not reach for it at all. "Thank you," he said. He set the bowl aside instead, pushed it gently onto the coffee table. The movement was deliberate, careful, as if he needed both hands free for what came next. His voice was steady, calmer than I expected. There was no tremor in it, no hesitation, just quiet certainty. "For what?" He looked down at his hands first, studied them for a moment. Then he looked back at me, and his expression was different than it had been in months open clear, like something heavy had finally been set down for everything. For the jobs, for the nights you did not sleep, for choosing to keep me alive even when it meant losing yourself for a while. My chest tightened, not with tears this time, but with something deeper, something that felt like relief and grief mixed together. I pressed my lips together and nodded slowly, not trusting my voice yet. "You do not have to thank me for that," I said when I could speak. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "I do, though." He shifted on the couch, turning more fully toward me. His shoulders were relaxed now, not hunched with anger or pain, like they had been for so long. "Because I understand now. I understand what you carried. I understand why you could not tell me. And I understand that every hour you were gone, you were actually fighting to stay." He paused, swallowed. His Adam's apple moved visibly in his throat. "I see what you sacrificed. I see the person you became so I could have a future. And I am grateful, not just because I am alive, but because I have a mother who would do that, who did do that." My hand moved to his face without my permission. My fingers trembled as they touched his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin, the softness of his youth. A tear spilled over and traced down my own face. I did not wipe it away. "You are my whole world, Ethan. You always have been." "I know," he said. "I know that now." I pulled him close, and he let me. His head rested against my chest, and I could feel the weight of him, solid and real and alive. I kissed the top of his head, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo, feeling the texture of his hair beneath my lips. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. Or maybe it was just loud because he was close enough to hear it. The movie continued softly in the background. The actors laughed at something. The laugh track played, but none of it mattered. The world had narrowed to this moment, to the warmth of my son against me, to the feeling of his arm around my waist, to the knowledge that we had made it through. We sat there in the glow of the television, and for the first time in nearly 2 years, I felt like we were okay. Not perfect. Not without scars. But, okay, healing is not a straight line. It is messy and complicated, and sometimes it feels like you are taking 2 steps back for every step forward. But it is possible, even when the damage feels irreparable. Even when the silence has lasted too long. Even when you think you have lost someone forever. It is possible to find your way back. Ethan is 18 now. He is in college, studying biology. He wants to be a doctor. He says he wants to help kids like him. Kids who are fighting for their lives. Kids whose mothers are fighting just as hard. He calls me every Sunday. We talk about his classes, his friends, his life. We talk about everything and nothing. And every time we talk, I am grateful. Grateful that he is alive. Grateful that he is healthy. Grateful that we found our way back to each other. The medical bills are almost paid off. Another year, maybe 2, and we will be free of them. It has taken nearly 4 years. 4 years of working 2 jobs. 4 years of sacrifice. But we made it. And more importantly, we made it together. I learned something through all of this. I learned that love is not just about what you are willing to give up. It is also about what you are willing to share. Your struggles, your fears, your humanity. I thought I was protecting Ethan by hiding the cost of his treatment, but what I was really doing was robbing him of the chance to understand how deeply he was loved. I was robbing him of the chance to carry the weight with me instead of watching me carry it alone. Silence is a thief. It steals connection. It steals understanding. It steals the very thing we are trying to protect. I will never regret working 3 jobs to save my son's life. I will never regret the sleepless nights, or the exhaustion, or the sacrifice. But I do regret the silence. I regret the wall I built between us in the name of protection, because in the end, what he needed was not just a mother who would save his life. He needed a mother who would let him see her, all of her, the strong parts and the broken parts, the sacrifices and the struggles. He needed to know that he was worth it, not just worth the money or the work, but worth the truth. And now he knows. If this story stayed with you, leave a word in the comments that captures what you are feeling right now. And if you want to hear another story about the complicated truths we keep from the people we love most, stay with me. Because sometimes the secrets we keep to protect our families are the very things that tear them apart.